That's right, everybody. Prepare for awesome. I'm going to use some of my fantastic drawing capabilities because I am not the avid streamer. So no fancy charts or graphs, just some hand drawings here for now. But yeah, one of the not so awesome things about fasting is your body starts producing adrenaline to because I mean adrenaline's one of the energy substrates your body can use in caloric deprivation. There's a few others that just aren't discussed and how they play a role in energy consumption, like, for instance, lactic acid and cortisol as well, which is why one of the reasons why cardiovascular exercise isn't exactly a great method of fat loss, right? I mean, everybody thinks that, but the body is actually, very efficient, and the cortisol and lactic acid produced from exercising, burned from, your glucose, basically can end up getting reused. If I remember correctly, one of the processes is called the lactic acid shuffle. I'd have to check, but anywho, not to go on too much, I do want to focus on one thing, right? Because I am up, and so I might as well just go ahead and make this video because this is an important part to what I'm doing. So, all right, here we go. So, in the case like myself, right, who's been eating a lot and has plenty of weight, you're going to see this particular. Let's see if I got it right. Okay, this particular. Still starting to see. There we go. This particular glucose response, right? So one error to note here. This is more like I have this at the 5-day mark, but this is more like like the 7-day mark. If for the relative scale on the y-axis, where you're going to get to potentially somewhere around 40-50 milligrams per dl of serum glucose levels, right? So what happens is right over here. This is a normal response. So let's say you take your fasting glucose before a meal and then you eat. Right. Of course, this depends, like this part of the curve is all going to depend on the meal composition. So this is basically a mixed meal with, to include, a good amount of carbohydrates. Right. Yeah. So you're gonna go up and it's gonna spike, and then basically as your body is tossing out the insulin to process and get rid of everything, you're gonna have a little dip, and then it's gonna start going back to normal. Except it doesn't just stop or level out. Right. So this is about, this happens at about the 8-hour mark, which is why the recommendation for waiting 8 hours until trying to take a fasted glucose measurement, is the recommendation. But what they don't exactly tell you, right? So if you take it a little bit early, you could be in this dip, and of course, you take it right after eating, like it could be really high. But from 8 hours on, it's not like it stops moving, right? I mean, it's going to be relatively stable, right? So between the 8 and the 24-hour period, right, it's going to have a slow and gradual rise up to where its stabilization point is, right? And this is the point, right? This is the point over here, really, that this whole kind of flat line where your body starts releasing stored glucose, right? So that's what that is. And then, and you see here too, like, so this is where I'm getting to right now, right? Which is why in the very last update, I said that, I'm going to start seeing a dip, right? So again, this dip really is going to go from, again, about the 72-hour mark. Of course, this straight line could extend a little bit far. I mean, it depends. It's not, it's not an exact science. There's too many variables to determine when exactly it happens. However, like, the nice thing is you can measure it and you can determine when it has started to happen, right? Which is the whole reason why I'm taking my fasting glucose measurement. So I want to get down here, right? I want to get down to the 40 to 60 range. I don't know how far I'm going to go. The last time I did a week-long water fast, I was at 46 milligrams per DL after 7 days. So I might stop when I get under 60, if that's the 7-day mark, before I start eating anything else. But that's my goal right there. Now, here's the thing, though. You do have a case for a lot of people, particularly women, right, There are a lot of additional stigmas with women and eating, right? So they tend to eat less, than men, right? And of course, I know plenty of men that have been under eating. And one of the other crazy things is, though, and like, you might be this person, probably know someone like this, basically, that eats like a bird and yet can't lose weight, right? And a lot of times this is actually due to under eating. And one of the very important things, and why, before doing any type of fasting or really, a severe caloric deprivation period, um, why it's so important to check your glucose, is you want to make sure you are not an undereater. If you are an undereater, it means you could actually gain weight or not lose any weight, or even like, or a significant amount of weight, when you start fasting, right? I mean, you might lose some water weight. You're not going to be eating salt. You might be, taking in a lot more water if you're not eating anything. So it's possible, but it's not a good situation to be in. So what you want to look for, if you're that person, right? Fancy graph again, is this type of response. And what'll happen is, let's say 100 milligrams is your baseline, right? And by the way, yes, I know the reference range is less than 100, but for recommended anyway. But let's say your reference range is 100, and you have your meal and you eat, and then it only dips up a little bit. But even like sometime even before the 24-hour period, like, really, if you don't have that long stabilization period for at least, really 48 hours, you undereat. Like, what it's going to mean is, and so number one, well, there's two potentials: either you undereat or you have some sort of nutritional deficiency, right? It's going to mean that your body's, running, energy conversion takes nutrients. And fun fact too, right? If you ever go for like a 5-hour energy, or look at any other energy drink, it's going to have a ton of B vitamins in it usually, because B vitamins are an important nutrient in energy conversion. So people who have nutritional deficiencies with B vitamins, they take an energy drink and, oh, hey, they feel great. I got all this energy. Yeah, and it's due to, getting those B vitamins and being able to convert the energy more, right? So you anyway, so the whole point is, right, if you're fasting and you have a nutritional deficiency, it could be really bad. It's not really going to help you out, and you're not going to see the weight loss that you expect, right? So you need to make sure that you're like me, and you're seeing that long stabilization period, like if you're going to go for this fasting period. And yeah, I had a couple of friends, and it was one of those cases where I was, talking with the guy, and then he mentioned like his girlfriend, who was going to do, look at their blood work with me a little bit too. And he's like, yeah, man, she undereats, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. And her fasting glucose was only 70 milligrams per DL. At the her 8 to 12-hour fasting glucose, yeah, that's right. So that was her 8 to 12, or yeah, her 8-hour fasting glucose, 8 12-hour fasting glucose was at yes, around 70 milligrams per DL. It went up to 80, but yeah, it was like, by the second day, it was back down to like, I think 70 or 75. So she had barely any bump, right? So that made absolute sense. They identified that she doesn't eat much. And so it's like, okay, my immediate recommendation to her, was, don't do this. Meanwhile, the guy, and this is a fun fact too, because I get a lot of times, a lot of the things that I say, they're well established scientifically. There's a lot of different papers and studies you can read that support it. But the problem is, it's not part of the typical mainstream information that you're going to read. And a lot of people look at my experiments and what I'm doing. It's like, oh, that's anecdotal. That's N equals 1. Like, you can't count that. It's like, no, like, look, I've got all these case studies, and here's all this biochemistry, and other items, that show that, like, look, this is really what happens, right? It'd be, there's a lot of undeniable things like that, like our body stores glucose, right? Our body stores about 3 days of glucose. It's like, so anybody with full glucose stores is going to see a very similar level. And the guy who was doing it, like, you know, it was exactly as predicted. If you have a healthy, if you are a healthy person with full glucose stores, you should be seeing about, you know, 100, you know, somewhere around 110, but above 100 milligrams per DL as that stabilization period. And yeah, he was a completely different person, right? About 10 years younger than me, you know, 6'2" or 6'4", you know, 250 pound, you know, black guy. So yeah, we're very different in a lot of ways. And his glucose responded the exact same way. I was able to predict what his glucose was every single day. You know, so anyway, that is what happens. Like, that is something to look for. So, you know, and that's why I'm going to do it. And the important part that's going to come in when maintaining the diet is I'm going to look for the periods. I'm going to look for how exactly the amounts that I eat impact the fasting glucose. And I'm going to start playing around with different conditions and different foods and things like that. It's still all kind of, you know, to be determined. But it's going to be important whenever I do a gorge, whenever I do a refeed, I'm going to look for the exact same patterns. And if you know, like if I do a gorge meal, for example, you know, you cannot, and normally if I do a gorge meal, like normally it's more like a gorge day. So it's, you know, going to be 2 or 3 meals in the course of the day, but trying to, you know, restock within a day as much of my glucose stores as possible. Typically speaking, after that, you can't refill all of them, but typically speaking, I can get at least, you know, 2 days worth of glucose from just 1 day of eating, right? And, you know, again, going back into just, you know, total fasting and caloric deprivation. But before I start eating again or incorporating anything else, again, I'm going to look for that same period. You know, depending on how far I want to go, normally speaking, yeah, it's going to be anywhere between 70 to 50 milligrams per DL. But that is, that is the important, you know, biometric indicator that my body is like just absolutely depleted of glucose. There is no more left available. It's drained from my liver. It's drained from my muscles. It's gone. And so that's why it's so important to look for. And I will talk more about, like, I'm starting to ramble now as all these thoughts are going in my head. So I'm going to cut it pretty soon here. You know, but that's why it's so important to look at these biometric, you know, indicators, and why glucose is important. You're going to see that glucose is proportional to, mind the dogs, glucose is proportional to ketone production as well. Yeah, I'll go and buy some strips here today, probably too. Anywho, that's about it before I start getting rambling too much with my, you know, starving brain here, you know, and not being able to sleep. So, hey, for the few folks that tuned in, awesome. Hey, you know, everybody, hey, leave comments, leave likes. If there's anything, any other experiments or things that you want to see, you know, from a, you know, for eating after a fasted state, let me know. I'd be glad to look at that and glad to discuss ideas for some test cases. Anyway, take care.